Driving the Conversation, brought to you by Volvo Brighton, supporting the Outside the Locker Room Foundation. So when it comes to supporting your friends and family who might be going through a difficult time with their own mental health, it's all about identifying the signs early enough. And one of the best environments to get them in order to ask them, are you okay, is everything going all right, is actually driving in the car. Now for men especially, we find it very intimidating at times to sit across from someone and talk to them eye to eye about our feelings and the way our emotions are making ourselves feel. So what better way than to pick them up in the car, take them off to the next football game, or even get them off to work and start the conversation about their mental health. So thanks to our friends at Volvo Brighton, we're putting together this short series called Driving the Conversation, where I will go around and pick up a few of my mates where we'll start the conversation about mental health. But before we get started, I want to explain to you all why I decided to approach Volvo when it came to putting together Driving the Conversation. Now, not only do they supply beautiful looking cars as the one we're in right now, but when it's about talking to your friends and family about their own mental health, it's about building the right, safe environment to do so. And Volvo, this XC90 we're sitting in right now, happens to be one of the safest cars on the road. So what better way to drive the conversation and start the conversation than in one of the safest cars on the road to build that safe environment. There you go, Mr. Campbell Brown.
Hello, brother.
How you going, all right?
Good to see you, mate.
You too, mate.
Been well?
Oh, I've been very well. Just picking you up here from the beautiful MCG.
Yeah.
A few memories there for you.
Some nice memories, some not so nice memories,
yeah.
But it's a great ground.
The premiership there, mate, will be one of the better ones getting around.
Yeah,
for sure.
That was a special day, 08.
Tell us a little bit about you, mate. You grew up in Western Australia?
Yeah, grew up in Western Australia, moved to Melbourne when I was 10. My old man got a job at the Richmond Footy Club for a few years, and the plan was always just to move back to Perth, but got here, fell in love with the city, obviously a huge sports fan, and this is the sporting capital of the world, I reckon. So we ended up staying in Melbourne, and apart from the few years I went up to the Gold Coast, been here ever since.
Yeah, great. Now, like yourself, mate, I've grown up with my old man playing VFL football and that, and your old man being, the great Mel Brown and so forth. What was it like for you growing up? Was football always going to be your thing, or?
Yeah, I reckon if you asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, from about 8 years of age, I always said I wanted to play AFL footy, and it was a dream of mine, and I wasn't a standout junior, so it's not like I was an automatic going to go down that path, but had to work pretty hard.
Yep.
Was always pretty small and skinny as a kid, so got overlooked in a few rep teams and things like that, but just kept at it, kept training hard and worked on my weaknesses, and was lucky enough to have a good sort of top age here when I was 18 years of age at Oakley Chargers, and the Hawks took a bit of a punt on me. Yeah,
true. So you got drafted. What's your earliest memories?
We were down at Glenfrey Oval back then. It was the Super Draft 2001, so got to the footy club the same day as Sam Mitchell, Rick Ladson, Luke Hodge.
Pretty good company.
Yeah, so there were some good players, but you're just a bright-eyed young kid going to a new club, and it's quite daunting.
Yep.
Just trying to fit in, and just try and sort of impress your teammates by the way you go about it.
So in 2008, mate, you win the ultimate premiership, Hawthorn. Yeah, well, what's your defining memories on that day specifically? Is there anything that stands out?
I started up forward and was playing sort of deep forward. Tom Harley was on me, and I kicked a big goal from outside 50 in the first quarter, which still to this day, I don't know how I kicked it. It's just, one of those those freak ones that could go on anywhere and went straight through the middle. And not long after that, Trent Crowe broke his foot and was done for the day. So I got switched from forward to full back onto Cam Mooney, who was on fire at the time. And I just remember walking down to full back just after half time, as we've come out after half time, and I knew I was playing on Mooney, and I've never been so petrified in my whole life, to be honest. Usually was a pretty confident sort of guy, but I just remember there was 100,000 people at the G, and I was just thinking to myself, I hope I'm not the one that gets they get hold of in the second half, and it costs us the game. And the very first inside 50 Moon's come screaming out and took a pretty
Clocked
good
it.
clunk,
Yeah.
20 metres out directly in front.
What were you thinking then?
I was standing on the mark, realising my worst fears, you know,
Yeah.
like he's got 6 inches on me, he's bigger, he's stronger, and he's taken this mark. He went back and he hit the post,
All right.
and that was a huge relief.
Yeah, it would have been.
And then we sort of got our game going in the third quarter.
So your time at Hawthorn, 156 games, was it? Right?
159 in the end,
games
yep.
at Hawthorn, and then you find yourself on the trade table, and you end up at Goldie.
Yeah.
So can you talk much about that experience? It must have been difficult.
Oh yeah, it was.
Was it on the cards?
A little bit. There's been some really good young kids at the club already that were sort of playing Box Hill, and they hadn't broken in yet to the AFL side. But the names of Bruce, Suckling, Geray,
right.
Ben Stratton had got to the club. So some really good players, and my role within the side had sort of had moved from a key position defender to a forward to a utility to just plugging holes. And while I was in the best 22 at the minute, I just felt like with that young talent coming through, and I had some limitations on my game, there's no doubt about that.
Something had to give way.
Yeah, something had to give way, and we've seen in the years previous how ruthless Clarko is. You know, like he's even happy
Still
to move
doing
on
it now.
Mitchell and Lewis, and you know.
Look at Ruffy now.
Yeah, so I knew what he was like, and that's why he's been such a successful coach, because he just picks teams on form, not on sentiment sometimes. And so when the decision to go to the Gold Coast came up, it was a pretty easy one from a football playing perspective. But it's always hard to leave the club you love, and you've had success there, and so I just had to take the emotion out of it and think what was best for my footy career.
Yep.
And it was at the Gold Coast.
Goldie, you sum that up in a short sentence?
It was tough.
It's tough.
Yeah, and we always knew it was going to be tough. The market's tough because there's not a lot of support, and we didn't have a home ground to start with. We didn't have training facilities. But we felt, because of so many early draft picks and just the talent on the roster, that we would pick up pretty quickly. And while the first year was a really exciting, fun one, because we had our first ever win, and we, you know, had the first ever home game, and everything was sort of new and exciting. It doesn't take long in this industry for opposition clubs to do their homework and work out some of the young kids' strengths and weaknesses. So year two,
You pulled down a little bit.
They picked us apart, and we couldn't get our game going. And the young guys that had great first years and surprised a few, it was like a whole year of second year blues.
Yeah, right. Well, on the journey, mate, you played with some pretty good players. One of them being Gary Ablett at that point in time, but obviously, Hodgie and all them at Hawthorn. Who's the best that you've pulled the boots on with?
Yeah, you're right. I've been pretty fortunate. Like Buddy, Hodgie, Crawford, Mitchell, they'll all be Hall of Famers. But the best player I've ever played with is Gary Ablett Jr.
Why is that?
You know, he was a great before he even got to the Gold Coast, but what he did up there was phenomenal, and I could see it firsthand. Like, it's always easy to play well in a good side that's winning, because you share the ball around and everyone gets on the end of it and everything. But when you've got, you're a standout midfielder in the team, and you're only surrounded by 18, 19-year-old kids, he was getting tagged every week. He was still managing to get 40 touches. He was going forward and kicking goals. He won our first 3 BNFs in a row. He won a Brownlow. He would have won another Brownlow if he hadn't have done his shoulder that year. And so I couldn't fathom how week in, week out, under the pressure and pretty close checking from taggers, and
kept doing what he's doing.
The whole game plan from the opposition was like, let's stop Gary Ablett. Yet he was still managing to get best on ground every single week. So he's pretty special.
So when your career finished up, mate, you went into another sport.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain how you got into, is it kabaddi?
Kabaddi,
is it? Yeah.
Oh, that was just
a bit of a
phone call out of the blue from a guy called Bruce Cater, who managed Bogut and Della Vedova and some of those guys. He was a player manager. And,
come across.
Kabaddi's a sport played by a lot of countries, in Pakistan and India and Bangladesh.
Yeah, it's huge over there.
South Korea, and so there's a lot of countries play the sport. I'd never heard of it.
No.
But they have a Kabaddi World Cup every 2 years, and they wanted to really expand, the sport. So they introduced England, Argentina, the USA, and Australia into the World Cup. The only problem was,
no one knew how to play.
Well, we'd never heard of it. So how do you put a team together of a sport you've never heard of? And so Bruce Cater rang me out of the blue. It was only a week out from the World Cup. That's how late they left it. And said, mate,
I want to play.
I've heard that you've always got a bit of spare time on your hands and you're always up for a bit of fun. Do you want to come to India and play this sport, Kabaddi? And my first reaction was, what the hell is it?
Yeah.
I said, I'm not too sure. It was leading into the Spring Carnival, which I love. So I wasn't too sure about taking 2.5 weeks off at the start of October to go overseas. And then he sort of said, how would you like to be the Australian captain? And I thought,
so you're the skipper.
Yeah, that's changed things a little bit. So he ended up, I said, mate, that'd be a real honour. Thanks very much. Have I been voted in by my peers or has it been ratified by the board, And he said, oh, no, you're just the first person that's committed to the trip. So he said, can you help me put a team together?
Yeah,
so we,
a few mates.
We got Schneider and Milne and I rang, a few, Brad Sewell and Brock McLean and whoever I could think of that had just
been a great
finished.
Experience.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first night against India, we played India opening night, and this was on Star Sports.
Yeah, it's huge.
180 million people tuned in. So I don't know how many watched the grand final, but it's like 5 million.
Yeah.
180 million. Yeah. We're standing there singing the Australian national anthem, and none of us knew the rules of this game.
Bringing it back to, I guess, the whole mental health thing and so forth, and that, and we've noticed lately a lot of more AFL players and that coming forward and talking about it, and we know that it's probably the biggest challenge at the moment in the game.
Yep,
individual
no
players,
doubt.
and that. Why do you think that is? And relating it back to your career, not personally, but throughout your journey, can you look back and go, you know what, I can kind of see it a bit?
No doubt about that, mate. What you're doing is absolutely sensational. So, when you messaged me, I was more than happy to come in for a chat. The first time I'd really taken much notice in it was probably my third year at the club, and Hawthorn had a couple of guys that silently had been dealing with it. And one was Glenn Bowyer, and he was going through his issues, but he never really spoke much about it. And then out of the blue, Nathan Thompson came forward.
Yeah, he's one of the first.
I think he was. Yeah, he might have been one of the first, and he was the vice captain of the footy club at the time. And our big strong forward, so it certainly caught me by surprise, and the fact that he was so open and honest, and he took a couple of weeks away from the game and put his hand up, and from that I think a few other players over the years felt more comfortable to talk about it. One of the reasons I think players they're just like anyone else in society, but because you see them every week and they're big and strong and young and got money and got everything you dream of, you never really associate them with having troubles. But I think social media plays a huge role today.
It's something that we missed during our careers, isn't
it? I just caught the end of it, and I got a pretty thick skin, so a lot of the abuse, and mate, don't worry, I copped a lot of abuse, but I always saw the funny side in it. Like, it never really affected me because I would laugh. It'd make me laugh at some of the stuff. But if you didn't have a really thick skin and you're a bit more sensitive or emotional than I am, no doubt it can certainly affect your mindset, even leading into a game or week to week and stuff. So that's one. But I'm just wrapped that the players now are feeling more comfortable and there's more resources going into helping players, and I think AFLPA and clubs now are better equipped at handling it.
Yeah, definitely. What's Campbell Brown do, mate, to relax a bit? What's he get up to?
I love watching sport. So fortunate enough working in the media, I work weekends and stuff, but during the week I get to spend a lot of time with my son. I love the NBA and the NFL and the horse racing and stuff, so I get to watch a little bit of that. And I love reading books. Get me a good autobiography on someone. You know, I really enjoy that, just to unwind at night. Music's a big one for me. So, and I love travelling as well. So yeah, there's always plenty of things to take my mind off it. But yeah, I started to take a lot more ownership, I suppose, of mental health halfway through my career, because I had one of my best mates at school who played in the first 18 with me, and we'd go, you know, spend weekends down in Portsea, and you know, he was always around at my house. Was dealing with a few things and kept things pretty quiet and close to his chest, and we never really had those those deep conversations.
Yep.
He took his own life. I reckon it was 2010, just unexpectedly. Maybe looking back, piecing it together afterwards, we saw some signs, but it was too little, too late, and I saw firsthand the impact it had on his family and just all those young boys. You know, just tragic. So since then, you know, I did a bit of work with Headspace and Beyond Blue and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. All doing great stuff.
Yeah.
Finally, mate, before we drop you off, what are probably 3 things that you'd say to someone, some advice, just around their own mental health? And
just feel open and honest with your friends, because you know, as blokes we like to bottle things up, and we don't like to talk about it. And I don't know if it's because you don't want to feel like you're showing a sign of weakness, but it's actually real strength to be able to talk about it and you know, let your family, your friends know what's going on in your life, because there's always something, you know, whether it's work or it's relationship or you're battling gambling or whatever it may be. All people want to do is help you, and you'd be surprised if you opened up and you're honest, the support you'd get from people. So don't shy away from that, because if people don't know, they can't help you, and life's busy. So make sure you just you feel comfortable enough, no matter who it is, whether it's a close friend or it's just your family, whatever it is. But that's the best advice I can give, mate, because if I could go back and change something with my mate, you know, I'd give anything to. So
appreciate you sharing that, mate. Appreciate you jumping in.
No, my pleasure.
Starting the conversation. All the best with everything. Appreciate it, mate. Good man. And I'll catch up with you soon.
Beautiful.
Good stuff. Take care, mate. So there we have it, guys. Our very first episode of Driving the Conversation. Thanks to the guys at Volvo Brighton. And also, thank you very much to Campbell Brown for joining us on today's episode. Now, the last little thing I want to remind you all is that building safe environments is really important to encourage our friends and family to open up if they're not quite feeling themselves. So make sure you take the time. Driving the car is just one of many great environments that you can do so. If anyone wants to learn more about outside the locker room, please visit our website. Otherwise, you can jump on our social media pages and learn more from there. But until the next episode, we'll see you then.
Driving the Conversation, brought to you by Volvo Brighton, supporting the Outside the Locker Room Foundation.